Okay, welcome to Salt Extensions today. Nick, who usually chairs the meeting, couldn't make it today. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the last couple of Salt Extensions working group meetings, but he's got a lot on his plate. He's really busy these days. So I think he figured that this is one that he could maybe miss, especially since he subbed for me a couple of weeks ago. So he won't be able to make it today, but and also Max is not able to make it today, but he sent a big long list of questions for us to ask. So we can hit those. But yeah, so today we'll be mostly engaging with Pedro because a couple of Salt Extensions working group meetings ago we had people like Gary and Max who were saying that they needed to better understand parts of the unit testing system or testing in general, and that was currently blocking some of their ability to be more effective Salt Extensions maintainers. So on with that in mind, like Pedro, thank you for being willing to come. I know it's a big hassle, especially the time of day and things like that. So I cannot say enough. Thank you for being willing to join us today and answer some questions. So yeah. All right.
Not a problem.
Oh, thank you. Well, very good. Well, I am going to, I know, Melissa, you've been especially looking forward to having Pedro join. Would you like me to go through Max's questions first, or would you like to ask some questions first? What would you prefer?
Let's go through Max's first, and then I feel like his cover quite a bit of the questions I had, and then we can circle back around if anything I feel is left out. I
Sounds
feel
good.
outnumbered today, by the way.
You feel what?
Outnumbered.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess it was, sometimes that happens. Like that happens in my other open source project where there's a day where people just don't show up as much, but yeah. So um don't feel too intimidated, hopefully. But yeah. All right. So let's start with Max's questions for you, Pedro. Max asks, are there any examples of how an orchestration SLS file can be tested? Yeah, let's start with that. He has a bonus question to ask about that, but what do you think?
Maybe.
Yeah.
No, I'm saying maybe because I haven't touched orchestration tests for a long time, but we should be testing them in Salt. So that's why I'm saying maybe. I'm sure there's some test coverage, probably not the ideal test coverage in Salt itself. But off the top of my hand, I have no guides besides looking for the orchestration tests in Salt, and they're probably short or not as much, and then try to pinpoint some more direct questions towards that. Um, yeah, I don't have like much information other than we might be testing that in Salt. I haven't really touched those in, I don't know,
Would
ages.
that be would that be similar to cloud tests?
No, that those I think those would be similar to um, like state tests, but they would be, my guess is they would be like integration tests, um, and not something slimmer like functional or unit tests, because the orchestration itself might be more heavyweight and easier to test if it's an integration test. And since there like for example, functional testing came out of a need for us to have faster and more lightweight, and we test without, well, with less moving parts, and that's why we started doing functional, which is more direct testing against the module and state modules and all of that, and not go through the salt master and the salt minion. But for orchestration tests, there hasn't been a strong need or time to focus more on that and simplifying. So it could be an integration test and just calling out the orchestration functions, and then asserting against the output.
So Max had a bonus question, kind of follow up related to that question. And it's good to have Shane here for that, which is how do you test an orchestration that runs something on a Windows minion?
I would run the orchestration on Windows. But I guess the follow-up question is more likely towards like there's no official support for a salt master on Windows. So I know where that question is coming from. It's triggered on a master, which is not on Windows, and then we run the orchestration on Windows. I say just do it like we do on our test suite. Even though officially we do not support the master on Windows, we do run the master on Windows for our test suite. And that's what I would do, like a Windows VM, and follow the same procedure of integration tests, calling the orchestration functions and asserting against the output. And this would be against the whole setup, like the master, the minion, and going through the CLI.
So would you say that this would be more like salt testing in general, like with like Test Kitchen or the other?
Well, I think it could depend on what you're trying to orchestrate, and it could be quite simple or quite complex. We've been moving away for things like Test Kitchen, mainly because we don't have enough manpower to support that or maintain that. And after a while, there wasn't actually a need. And so what we usually do is we set up a VM previously, like we have the golden images, like if we need services or software installed that we will need during the testing, we will have an image for that. And so I would follow that same procedure. Although if it's a more complex orchestration, then probably then something else needs to be added to the equation. But if we're just testing the orchestration functionality, I don't think we need to go that big. But again, as I said, like it's been ages since I've touched the orchestration tests. And so there's definitely room for improvement there.
Anything, Shane, you came off mute. Was there anything you wanted to ask about it or comment on?
No, I didn't know I was off mute. I'm glad I didn't do anything stupid.
No, usually when people come off mute, I'm like, oh, they want to talk. It's all good. Since we are talking about Windows, I noticed David is here. Thank you, David. It's good to have you here. What we're doing right now, David, in case you aren't aware, is we're just kind of asking Pedro some questions that we have about testing. Max has sent us a list of questions that he wanted us to specifically ask Pedro. And Melissa also has some questions that are very similar to Max's. But David, since you just joined, I would be willing to say, do you have a specific question that you would like to ask first before we continue with the rest of Max's list?
Not really. I was more interested in just catching up on what other people wanted to know, really.
Sounds good. Okay. Well, it's good to have you here, and then feel free to ask any clarifying questions or anything like that.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Okay. So the next question it's very similar to the first question. Are there any examples for reactors that can be tested, including on Windows or things like that? So what are your thoughts on that?
Same approach. I get why these questions keep popping up because there's definitely not enough examples in the Salt test suite. But it's the same approach. Look at what we are doing because we should be testing something. Obviously, not enough because there's doubts on how to do it. But it would be an integration test. There's no simpler way to test that unless obviously you go through unit tests and you patch the hell out of it, which sometimes is good, sometimes it's not. You patch a lot and then you're basically testing your patches and not the actual code that we want to test. So for the safe route, I would start off with integration tests. And I'm sure we have some reactor tests, probably one or two, which in the universe of close to 16,000, I think. That was the last number that I remember seeing. Probably more these days. It's not enough, obviously, but no major clues as to what and which examples besides what we have as suit. So basically, a salt master and a salt minion. The reactors usually are an SLS file that react to tags and all of that. So lay those down on the file system and then just call the CLI and provoke the reactions.
Any follow-up questions to that from anyone in the room? Virtual room. Okay, cool. All right. Next question for Max. Do you have any general guidelines or scenarios on when it is best to use each kind of test, whether it's best to use a unit, a functional, or an integration test in regards to salt extensions development and different kinds of modules, and also to test state files? That was a big question. Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a matter of preference. Other times it's a matter of resources, which can sometimes also involve cost. The cost might be time, or it might actually be money, depending on how you actually test salt itself. I've always tried to do kind of functional testing because that's how you run against the functions and stress the code that was written without patching too much. You still have patching available, but you usually don't need to. Obviously, this kind of functional testing means that you're actually interacting with a system or the system or a service, and sometimes this might not be possible. So to kind of drill down on the choices, obviously for speed and running tests fast, unit tests, that's the answer. There are, however, times where we have to patch too much and we might fall into the path of we are actually testing what we patched and not the code. And obviously that doesn't test anything because the code changes, but your patches didn't change. And so the tests don't fail until we see the failure in actually the release. But if you're careful about only patching what's actually, well, the minimal things to get the test to work and the infrastructure to work, I would go unit testing. Those are the fastest ones. Then to be on the safe side, I would definitely add functional testing because that means that you're actually running code against a system or a service or the.
Oh, did we lose Pedro for a second? Uh-oh.
Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you for coming.
That was great. Hopefully we'll get him back. Technology, am I right?
Dead phone battery?
I don't know. He's still on the call, so I'm assuming it's more like he lost service or something. Mm-hmm.
And so then you're sure.
No. Okay. Okay, Pedro, you're back. Are you back with us, Pedro? Yes, Pedro? Pedro, can you hear us? I think you're on mute.
Okay.
Okay.
So that means that you did not hear all of that, right?
Yeah, where did we lose Pedro? Like, can somebody catch us up on like kind of where we were?
Where.
Okay.
I was interrupted by a phone call by my service guys that said that I also need the brakes to get serviced, but not today.
Yeah, you were saying that you start with unit tests and then you do functional tests additionally.
Yeah, sorry. So unit tests for the speed, functional testing because you're actually running code against the system. And if you really have to, then an integration test, because an integration test is almost like an end-to-end test where we actually test all of the things like the CLI, the salt minion, the salt master, the protocol. And I believe that for most cases, with regards to extensions, you probably don't need integration tests. And again, this is a probably. It doesn't hurt if you have a couple of them, obviously, just to be on the safe side. But I would focus on unit tests first, and then some functional tests, so that you actually test your code against DOS and all of that you need to test. That would be my way of going about this.
Yeah. Follow-up questions from anyone on that? Okay. All right. Well, one more question from Max. How do you test a custom module function that calls a state.slow_low state without mocking it so that I can make asserts against it being run with an actual state tree? It seems to require a lot of mocks or ops to be able to run successfully.
Yeah, for that one, I would definitely go the functional route, because, well, you have to lay down the custom module, and that runs almost separate from the test suite. But you could build like a queue system, like you have a queue that is available, and then you just add data to the queue, and once you're done and still on the task, you can push the data from the queue and assert against that. That would be a way. And that's like if the return call is not enough. If you want to test like several steps, I would do something like that. Like either have, like for example, the way we pass logs from the daemons to the test suite is using 0 and kind of a pub/sub approach. So I would do, if I needed to go that deep on the testing the custom module, I would do something like that. Add data to a queue, for example, that can be pulled from the test suite after we call it. And that would reduce the amount of patching that we would do.
Okay. Follow-up questions on that one? All right. Well, that is actually the end of Max's list. So again, I'll kind of toss it to anyone who wants to ask a question, Melissa, David, or anyone else, about if you have any questions for Pedro. So yeah.
So I put a link in chat. Since you're on your phone, Pedro, I don't know if you'll be able to look at it at the moment, but I was just wanting to confirm that the testing portion of the contribution guide would still be largely applicable to the extensions, but I guess I'm also asking if it could be looked at to see if it's up to date or if there are changes, because I know that you're using PyTest now, and I don't know if it's necessarily up to date in the guide.
So we've been using PyTest for quite a while now, and whenever we do see something that is using the old test suite, like the system library unit test, we kind of tend to update that. Obviously, yeah, right now I cannot say that it's fully migrated to the PyTest approach, but it should be at least most of it. Obviously, we should have a look at if that's still the way that we should be testing, because obviously the way we test has evolved over time, and I cannot guarantee that the docs have evolved the same way. I will have a look at the link. Yeah, right now on the phone, it's with Zoom and all of that, it's more problematic. So I'll have a look at that. But yeah, there's always a place for more documentation, and specifically on the topic that you mentioned, which is regarding the salt extension. I believe we could add some examples to simplify the maintainers of salt extensions, at least to start. And I'm almost sure that we don't have that many examples using salt extensions, if at all. besides any salt extension that we have extracted over time. And so I get your question, and I'm 100% sure that that documentation is to get improved, specifically towards the salt extensions topic.
Okay. And then what was I going to ask? So it's been a while since I've actually contributed anything. I think it was pre-PyTest, and I also had a lot of help from Wayne. So would you recommend to sort of get started with that, just reviewing the existing tests and sort of using them as examples to walk myself through setting one up?
Well, yes, Angie, if you actually go through that trouble, you would be helping us because you would be identifying the parts where we're lacking or wrong today. And so if you have a chance to do something like that, that would be most welcome, because that would mean that we have specific things that we needed to fix as opposed to looking at the doc and restructuring it.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. I think that pretty much sums up my questions.
Yeah. Related to that, Melissa, like one of the things that I always kind of recommend people do is to keep a friction log. Like if you're given what task or what goal you have, like just kind of write down any kind of pitfalls that you had while you were doing it, and then how you finally solved it, or if you didn't solve it at all, so that you can then pass that information on to us, and we can hopefully do something to make the experience better for others. So capture it in the documentation or something like that. I think that would be great. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a good idea.
Okay, cool. David, did you have anything else that came to mind while Pedro was talking that you wanted to ask?
There is one thing. I've heard that the team is moving away from Test Kitchen and the plug-in kitchen salt towards PyTest, I guess. But is PyTest appropriate for testing formulas? So what I mean is that you would apply a state to a test minion, and then you sort of check the results that the correct things have changed.
So to answer you, the team is not moving away. The team has moved away. We are not using Test Kitchen at all. Anywhere in our test suite. And if you still have a mention of kitchen or Test Kitchen, then it's something that we need to take out. We are no longer using Test Kitchen. The need over time, it stopped making sense, because we basically bring up the machine, we set up whatever we need to do. Some things are set up previously by the means of golden images, and so we no longer have the need to maintain yet another project and use Test Kitchen. So just to get that out of the way. With regards to PyTest and formulas, yes, PyTest is perfectly fine to test formulas. We actually have, and I believe this is either on the 2007.x branch, but definitely on the master branch, we have some examples about testing formulas. And I know this for a fact because I have been, I just this week I think I removed some tests that weren't actually testing anything, and fixed some other tests that were broken. Given that that's a pretty simple test, we are basically making sure that it works, and just making sure that the state tree for the formula works. So it's not massive. But yes, you can use PyTest and PyTest salt factories that we use with salt to test salt formulas. I would definitely, if it were me, yes, I would do something like that.
Okay, well, I'll take a closer look at that and see what we can do with that.
Yeah, and obviously, and formulas being something that, well, does make sense, but we haven't been tested until quite recently. I'm sure there's a lot of improvements to be done, even on the way that things get tested. And so, based off of your experience, I'm sure that the team would be more than welcome to improve either the tooling required, or even if you find a better way to do that, suggest that, because the salt test suite needs to also test that, to test formula support so that we don't break that support over time. So if you have to find a better way of testing formulas, that could probably be included in the way that we test salt, like using PyTest or something like that, or the way that we test salt itself, then yeah, we would be more than welcome to receive those better ways or improved ways of testing formulas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, anytime.
Any other questions from you, David, or is that good for you? Or
That's good for me, yeah.
okay, good question. Thanks so much. So Shane and Murphy, do you have any questions for Pedro?
I have some, but I can ask them outside this meeting because it's related to some bugs.
It's all good. How about you, Shane?
I have more specific questions that I've already asked him in chat.
Okay, sounds good.
Just to emphasize the kitchen salt, I'm currently pulling it out of the Bootstrap, how we build Bootstrap script that used kitchen salt for testing Bootstrap. We're pulling that out to use GitHub Actions. But that's being done in the background. But yeah, kitchen salt is definitely, it's got a stake through its heart.
Okay, I see. So yeah, one more thing on that then. So the whole point of test kitchen is that you could sort of create a temporary machine with a minion that you apply things to and you can test or whatever. So that temporary thing is you're moving towards like runners, and so GitHub Actions will bring up a test runner and then you do what you need and then take it down. Yes.
Yeah. Kitchen salt made sense back in the middle of the last decade, but since GitHub Actions, it doesn't make sense to have to build and maintain your own stuff when it's already there for you in GitHub to use.
I think the question could also, or probably more targeted, like with Kitchen, it would like bring up a container, run the test, and be done with it. And what we are suggesting right now is to use PyTest to do something like that. And we can bring containers up with PyTest. There's a lot of examples in the salt test suite. With a container up, you can run some commands to set up the container, which is what Kitchen Salt would do. And then you can test against that. So that's why we stopped using Test Kitchen. Like if we need to prepare the system up front by some big binaries that needed to be installed, we stopped doing that because we created golden images. And when we need to do something else during the runtime, while the test suite is running, we use either containers or run against the DOS itself. So yeah, I would use like the PyTest fixtures, which is how you could set up like the environment to test your OS. If that means bringing up a container, installing stuff on it, or something like that, yeah, that's also possible. And personally, that's how I would do it.
Okay, I see. I wasn't aware of that, to be honest. So yeah, that answers my question, I think.
Yeah, and if you look at the salt test suite, I believe the method is called start container or get container. So something like salt underscore factories dot get container. If you grep through that, you will see a lot of examples of starting the container. What we did, and this was to save time for our test suite, was to actually have pre-baked containers. Like for example, if we need to test against Postgres or MariaDB or another service or something like that, we have those images prepared just so that we save time. For example, if the if what you're testing, like the form for the formula, is setting all of that up, yeah, that's it. There's no point of us having a pre-baked container images because we actually want to see if the formula does what it has to do. But I would definitely use PyTest for that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, for the month.
Okay. Any other questions that anybody thought of? Anything you wanted to add, Murphy? You had brought up that last thread.
Nope.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that brings us to the end then. Huge thanks to Pedro. I know it was a real challenge to come today and last week, of course. So thanks for being willing to come and talk to us and share your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. And I have to give another thanks to like Shane. Like we really missed you last time. Nick and I had to sub and come up with some jokes in your absence, and we were a pretty poor substitute for you. Do you happen, Shane, to have a joke to end today's meeting with?
What do you get when life does not give you lemons?
I don't know what.
Scurvy.
Oh,
Nice.
And
So you want
have,
life. Oh, go ahead, Pedro.
You are making me go Google what that is.
Oh.
think of the British Navy in Captain Cook and how as the first captain, his crew didn't get scurvy, even though they were around the world. And the Admiralty was so impressed, they gave him loads of voyages. It was the bane of long-distance sailors back in the 17th, 18th century. And I have one question for you, Pedro. Are you going to make stand-up if your car's in the shop?
Oh, you're on mute again, Pedro.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I hope so. I hope this doesn't take that long.
Okay, great. Because I got some questions for you.
Yeah. If I'm still stuck here, I will join by the phone.
Okay.
Good stuff.
Thanks.
Well, thanks for the joke, Shane. It's good to have perspective that you actually want life to give you lemons, right?
Or it could be limes, or oranges, or anything with vitamin C.
The problem
that doesn't work with the joke.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. But and also I have a problem, like I can turn lemons into lemonade, but lime I can't. I know there's limeade, but I always accidentally call it limonade all the time. And so like I would be turning limes into limonade. But anyway, we need lemons. So all right. Thanks for a good meeting, everyone. Thanks, Pedro. We really appreciate it. And hope you have a lovely day. See you all at open hour today. Bye.
Okay, well.